Welcome to another vintage fishing reel service video. In this episode we've got an oddball, kind of a cool looking reel called the it's called the Aristocast number 1915B, sold by Horrocks-Ibbotson Company out of Utica, New York, of course made in the USA. This reel reminds me a lot of not exactly, but it reminds me a lot of a popular, although not very common and somewhat expensive reel to buy, and that would be the Marabou reels, like the Marabou Prince and the Marabou Princess by Clay Sporting Goods. Let's see if I can find one of mine and show you some similarities. Okay, I dug out my Marabou Prince, made in Pontiac, Michigan by Clay Sporting Goods, and you can see where I get the idea that they kind of look similar just in their shape and so on. This one, the line stop, is this little lever here. That's what holds your line while you're casting, and of course it doesn't have a thumb hole or anything like that, but by the shape they kind of are reminiscent of each other. But at any rate, there's some really good information about this reel and the other reels made by the person that engineered this one, and it's an article available online. If you search it, it's titled "The Spinning Reels of Edward F. Small." It's an article based on two separate articles published in a publication called The Reel News. The articles came out in 2001 and 2007, and they were by gentlemen by the name of Stephen Vernon and Randy Heller. And so there's a whole bunch of information about the guy that designed this reel and others by the name of Edward F. Small, who was kind of an inventor, invented a number of different things, among which ended up being fishing reels. And his first patented reel invention was a side-mounted reel called the Cormorant, and that was submitted for patent in 1949 and patented in 1950. And apparently this reel has some components or functions that are similar to that first reel, the Cormorant. So he started a business called E.F. Small & Sons in Boston, but a lot of his reels were maybe manufactured elsewhere and certainly sold under different names. So there was reels that he designed that were sold by Ocean City, one called the Spin-Along. Some of you are familiar with the Holiday reels, like I think there was a Holiday 50 or whatever, kind of really aerodynamic bullet-shaped reels that were Small's designs that were sold through the Holiday Reel Company, and in that case were actually made in overseas. But at any rate, the Aristocast 1915B was sold through Horrocks-Ibbotson and was I think first cataloged in 1957, and probably were only produced maybe a year or two. So this probably dates to 1957 or maybe 1958, and it wasn't long before this was updated into a newer model, the 1916, that had even a different name. It wasn't the Aristocast anymore. So, and the authors in that paper I was telling you about indicate that these patent numbers are associated with the Cormorant, indicating that this probably has some design features similar to his very first reel, the Cormorant. So I've never been into this thing. I love oddball reels that have kind of interesting engineering designs, And I haven't been into this one yet, so I don't know anything about what's going on in there in the marabou prints. But I do know that on this one, what I find fascinating about it is if you take off the rear cover here. Let's see here. It's a twist and a pull. This spinner head basically is to the rear of the reel. The line comes off of the spool around the spinner head through a hole in the middle of the spinner head and then out the front. Because I was thinking, oh, how can the spinner head be in the rear and the line comes out the front? Well, it comes off that spool over there. You know, this is the sort of the hook, you know, the pickup pin that you wind with, and then it goes through that hole, and so you can still cast and wind and stuff, but it wraps around that spinner head through the hole in the middle and then out the front. Very unusual design, something I've never seen before. And so this, you can see it does have a where is it? I know I saw a drain hole on there. Yeah, there's your drain hole. So that goes towards the bottom, and then you line up these grooves here with the little punch there, and it just slips on and clockwise tightens it on. There's your thumb hole. Doesn't look like it's been cleaned, so there's a lot of dirt in there. So we can put that in the parts tray. Now, you know, I have no idea what I'm doing here, but in terms of accessing the guts, the gears and so on, I'm seeing, now this, by the way, is your anti-reverse. So it actually does have an anti-reverse on it. I think it's engaged now. If I switch that off, now it's anti-reverse override. So that's anti-reverse there, and then this way is anti-reverse. This is your drag. This is your drag. So it's got anti-reverse and a drag. But I'm seeing a screw here and one there. Is there just two? And I'm guessing that will allow us to pull out the guts of this thing. So let's get a screwdriver and see what happens. Okay, I'm a little nervous because this is a really cool, somewhat uncommon and rare reel. So I'm being very careful, especially about turning these screws. You're not going to find parts for this probably. I just pray that I don't break a screw off. It doesn't look like it's corroded or anything, but this is a really cool reel. So I'm going to take off that screw, and then there's another one here towards the bottom. I'm just going to go really slow. I don't want to booger them up. Okay. There's those. Now let's just hope. I'm going to move this up out of the way. I don't know. I don't see any other. It might, you know, and it might just be kind of stuck in there. Of course, maybe you need to take. Maybe I should try before I start trying to winkle anything out of there. Maybe this crank handle needs to come off before I start getting too crazy. We'll just see what this does. But I don't want to booger anything up, so I'm going to just try winkling. I do see it moving, the interior. I'm just putting a screwdriver into those holes and trying to, I just don't want to booger it up and scratch it up. Let's try getting some leverage here once. So I can see it moving, but it does not. You just wonder if you have to take off this collar. I'm going to try that and see what happens here. on second thought, I got to thinking, this and the spinner head move together. So it might be that this is what's keeping the guts from coming out. And there is a little set screw right there. So I'm hoping that if I take this off, see that little set screw there, that I can back the innards out of this thing. So let's try getting a hold of that. And boy, I just can't get much leverage on these little screwdrivers. They need fatter handles. Okay, set screw is moving. Presumably you don't have to take this all the way out. Okay, so there comes that. And now I wonder, well, at least that's going to let us get, I got to be careful here. I don't want any parts flying out. And who knows, I probably just stripped the pinion gear off of that. There's your spinner head and pickup. Okay, so the pinion gear is still in. Okay, the pinion gear is pressed onto this thing here. So I am not going to go too crazy on this reel. I'm going to just clean it. I'm going to take it apart to the extent necessary to properly clean it and get it functioning, and that is it. But there's your anti-reverse and anti-reverse override. So that's anti-reverse engaged. This is anti-reverse override. And there's just a little hair of a spring wire there for that. This felt is intact here. This here has got some rust coming from the wire at its core, but it's intact, and so I'm going to leave that alone. But I am going to carefully hand strip this line off of the spool. Okay, as I was stripping that line off the spool, I got to wondering how the drag works. And so there's your drag screw, and it's there's a little spring out here, and that just keeps the tension on it. But it basically, counterclockwise you're backing it off, and clockwise you're back. So you got to wonder, backing it in, you got to wonder what is that engaging. And it looks like it's engaging this plate right here. And so, okay, so this little plate here acts as a brake. So this spool turns around, but if I push on that plate, can't turn it anymore. So it's just putting a little pressure on this plate. And I'm not going to get in there, and looking what's going on in there, because I'm pretty sure that this and this pinion gear are pressed in there, and I don't want to get down in there. I don't want to risk ruining that, because it looks like that's pressed in. So I can clean the best I can by spinning this spool around and cleaning up in there. I can lubricate in there as necessary, but this is as far as I'm going with that. Trying to figure out what this thing is here. Does that just create tension on the axle shaft, this little thing here? I don't know. It's definitely worn by what appears to be the axle shaft. I mean, I don't know if you can see how worn that is, and it morphs to the curvature of the axle shaft. So it just seems to provide tension on that. The question is, can we get this? I guess to get the main gear out, you're gonna have to, I think, take off this collar here. I thought about doing that initially because I thought maybe it was influential in getting the reel apart, but it wasn't. It was this nose piece. But let me go off camera and see if I can loosen that up. Well, this is, and I'm not sure if it's standard thread or reverse thread, but I don't have, first of all, you got to hold on to this brass piece while you crank on this one. I don't have the correct tool, and I don't want to booger that thing all up trying to use pliers and stuff on. I tried putting a towel over it with pliers, and it's not budging, and I don't want to damage it. And so this is a little tight, okay, but I'm going to try to run some WD-40 down in there and rinse whatever gunk is out of there, and then try to lubricate it without taking off this sleeve here. But that's how you'd have to get it out, and I'm just not wanting to risk it. So that, I think, is quite simply the, here's a washer, and I don't know where it came from. I'm guessing, well, there's a washer around here. It's exactly the same diameter. Maybe I can go back and watch the video and see where that dropped off of. My guess is that, although it's not a whaley, but my guess is it goes on this shaft somewhere. It sort of matches that that shaft, and I don't quite know where else it would go. So, but at any rate, I'm going to put all, it was relatively simple in there, but that's as far as I'm going to tear it down so I don't ruin this beautiful, somewhat uncommon reel, and get this all cleaned up, and we'll be back just like that. One of the things that I discovered when I was cleaning it, after I started to run WD-40 down and work it down in there, is that the main gear will come out without having to remove this bushing and all that here. So you don't even need to mess with trying to get that off. You don't want to booger that up. It's just simply not necessary. The trick was just pushing down this tensioner spring here, and I lubricated it first because it was pretty gummed up in there, and then just pulled it out past that tensioner spring, and which made me very happy because you can clean it out to a certain extent by trying to sneak WD-40 down in there and working that back and forth, but nothing replaces being able to take it out. And in many cases I like to grab, where is it, some steel wool and shine that up a little bit. Look at that. And then lubricate that with some oil. So I think that's the first thing we're going to do, is oil that up and get it started back in there, and start to push that in. And when we get to where that tensioner spring is, we're going to push that down and put that back into place. So that spins really nicely. Now the grease had sort of migrated by gravity down to one spot, and it was kind of sticking in one spot. It's now moving smoothly in its full rotation. All right, so I'm trying to think, was there anything else in there? One of the worst things that could happen did, and that is that during disassembly I wasn't careful, and this shim washer came out from somewhere, and I don't know where. I just don't know. it looks like there are 2, possibly 3, but I think 2 washers there. This one is either stuck to it intentionally or otherwise. Okay, yeah, so that one does come off. Get that gunk off of there while I'm underneath there. All right. So now we can grease the pinion gear. And that may be all that I don't know if I really need to grease that main gear. There wasn't much factory grease or whatever in here, even dried up stuff. But I just don't know if I want to mop a bunch of grease on those teeth. I think I'll just let the grease from the pinion gear lubricate that. And then I'm going to want to oil this anti-reverse pawl and get some oil up underneath that so that can move freely, and a little bit on this pivot point and some underneath the anti-reverse override, just to get that moving nice and freely. And I'll go ahead and engage that for now. I don't know the extent I want to try to. There is a hole there. I wonder if that's a lubrication hole. The question is, I don't know if you're supposed to lubricate this spool or not. I don't see why not. There is a hole there. I don't know what other purpose that hole would have. So maybe I'll just sneak a little oil underneath there and leave that at that. All right. And maybe, just to protect, I don't think it does much good, maybe just a little grease on that pressure plate that the drag screw runs on. And then that went together like that. Let's see here. And we're going to want to, there's a couple things I want to do here. I want to grease, you see there's some corrosion there. I'm going to get the steel wool and try to get some of that rust off in there. And then I want to take and put a little grease in there to hopefully keep that from getting any worse. I'm just going to coat that with a thin coat of grease, and then I'm going to oil this pickup pin here, claw or whatever you want to call it. It's kind of a little hook, and work that in. Then oil that shaft there and get that in place. Now we're ready for the handle, and I'm not gonna do it in the video. I'll do it later. I don't feel like going outside right now, but I want to very carefully. This is slightly bent. I don't know if you can see that. This is bent, and the bend is right there. And you're gonna want to be careful not to wrench on this part. I'm going to have to somehow get a hold of that and try to bend that down, because I don't like the way it's not supposed to be bent like that, but I'll do that at another time. Right now I'm just going to go ahead and set my handle back on there and get this screw in. It wasn't quite as scary as I thought it was going to be once I got inside. I could imagine this having been stuck there and then later fell off. Maybe if I go back and look at the video, we can see where it fell off. Problem is that's making it hard to wind. It's adding a lot of resistance. And I don't see what other function it would, you know, if I back this nose cone off the shaft a little bit, I don't see how that's gonna, then the thing doesn't have any purpose at all. But this thing does want to, I don't know if you can see that, but it starts spinning independently of the handle sometimes. See that? It's not, and it wasn't doing that when that washer was in there. As soon as that goes in, this thing gets, that's not so bad now. I'm not getting that weird independent movement of the spool once I put that washer in that location. But it does add some drag to the winding of the thing. But it does seem to be working more properly. So I'm going to leave it there for now. Put it all together, put some line on it, see if it works, and then go back and look at the video and see if I can find out if that piece originally went there or not. So I'm thinking to put line on this to be able to wind it on. I'm going to have to run the line through the front, out the spinner head, I think, and then tie it. Get off of there. And then tie it around the spool. Well, that's not going to work because it's the other end of the line that has to go through the middle and out that way. I can't tie this onto the spool. It wouldn't do anything. And so I'm trying to figure out, you got to get the line on the spool first, and then use the end of the line, the outer end of the line, to thread through there and out there. So do you have to you have to add line to the spool by hand? That's the only thing I can think of right now. And I'm probably having a brain fart, and somebody's going to be saying, no, this is how you do it. But I don't know how else you would do it other than to hand wrap that line on the spool, after it's on there, take it around the spinner head through the hole and out the front. I don't know how else you would do that. Even if I took off the spinner head, ran it through there. No, I don't know. Maybe somebody out there has a better idea, but I've never heard of a reel that you had to hand wind the line on the spool. But I can't think of another way to do it, with the spinner head being at the rear. Okay, maybe I'm an idiot and there's a better way, but at this point, my brain can't figure it out. So I have hand wound some measure of line on there. I'm not familiar enough with these reels to know when it's over or underlined. So I'm going to leave it about right there. And then clip it off. And then at this point, you run it through, so far as I know, you run it through there and then out the front. And that's when you're, well, you're going to have to put the cover on before it's going to catch. Get it to catch on that hook. Like that. And then rear cover. And lock that into place. So now, I've got a knot in there now. I'm going to try, let's see here. Backward spin. Line's coming out. Forward spin. It's reeling in. That's with the override, anti-reverse override on. If I turn that off, okay, line is releasing, and it is catching. So backwards turn, line is releasing, forward, it's winding in. And the drag, I've got it set pretty tight right now, but I'm going to loosen up the drag. Drag's coming out easily. Tighten that up. Can't hardly pull it out. Loosen a little bit. It's coming out hard but reasonably. So again, anti-reverse is on. It's winding. Backward turn, it's coming out. Forward turn, it's winding again. So it appears to be working properly. The clicker associated with the anti-reverse is working where it wasn't before. The drag is working. The anti-reverse and anti-reverse override is working. So the only issues then I have is, did I get that shim washer where it's supposed to go? It's when I put it as the third washer on the inside of the spinner head, that was creating problems in terms of the gears engaging. When I did not have it between the nose cone and this nose piece, there was some issues with the gear and the winding and the spinner head not being in sync. So when I did put it in there, things seemed to be working. So I'll go take a look at the video and see if I can verify that I have that in the correct place. And but as it is, everything is working as it should. So we now have a completely serviced, presumably correctly reassembled. And again, the one other issue I have is that I can't figure out any other way how to put line on it other than by hand winding, given the way that this is set up. This end has to come off the spool through the back of the spinner's head and then out the front. And I don't know how to do that otherwise. I don't know how to wind it on. I don't know how to do it other than hand wind. But we now have a completely serviced, presumably correctly reassembled, beautiful, interesting Horrocks-Ibbotson Aristocast number 1915B, designed and patented by Edward F. Small, and would have been put up for sale by Horrocks-Ibbotson in 1957 and maybe only marketed for a year before it was replaced by the number 1916. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time.